The Pacers led by as many as 28 points in what was a 117-98 win over the Milwaukee Bucks. They outscored Milwaukee 22-5 in fast break points. And although Giannis Antetokounmpo wasn't exactly limited as a scorer, he was limited somewhat as a playmaker. All in all, you might say the Pacers, especially when comparing both of these two respective starting lineups, made Game 1 look Nemb easy. Today, joining me to talk about it all on a game that he described as quote-unquote no joke is my favorite basketball talker / writer, Samson Folk. Samson, what do you think about that win and why was it no joke?
It's tough to navigate poor shooting performances from stars in the playoffs. However, the whole season, and I guess for almost 2 seasons, you and I have been describing this Pacers team is counterpunchers, unique players, adaptable. And that's why they had such a good record against the top teams in the NBA this year, is because of that adaptability. If something doesn't go well, they can go to other things. It seemed from the outset, if you looked at this game, you're like, everything went well for Indiana. But it didn't. They're just seamless in transitioning between what works for them at different times. And that's why it's no joke. That adaptability in winning is really important for good teams. And while Dame isn't yet here, and the Bucks got one of the craziest Kuzma performances of all time, and there's stuff like that, they had enough stuff go right, and they played diligently, they played secure, and I really enjoyed the basketball game, especially since my rooting interest was on the more fun side of things.
From the Pacers side of it all, I thought that the actual defensive coverages against Giannis as a scorer were about what we laid out in the preview.
This the cool thing about doing work with you is usually that stuff comes out. I've done playoff preview preps on the Raptors side of things, and maybe it's a little bit of like the Nick Nurse will always do insane things, but trying to predict matchups and stuff like that wasn't always so easy. But when, Caitlin puts her nose in the book of like what is going to happen during this series, and I get to talk about it, it showed up within like the first 3 minutes. I was like, oh, this is the podcast. Excellent.
So for people who don't know, Giannis had 36 points. He only had 1 assist. Samson and I both do not like assists as a statistic. I don't think that they're all that meaningful. However, I will use potential assists, and potential assists in this game are a tad bit more meaningful because, as we noted, the Bucks did not shoot the ball well. So, in the regular season, overall, Giannis averaged 13.06 potential assists per 100 chances. Against the Pacers in the regular season, that number was even higher, 13.314. In Game 1, however, a significant drop-off, 8.511 potential assists per 100 chances. So, why do you think that the Pacers were successful in limiting him as a passer and not just because the attempts came up empty with Bucks missing open threes?
I think this is maybe not exactly schematic, but I think it's, a positive feedback loop for the Pacers in that they were moving with Giannis as a team, which meant they sent him to the line quite a bit, especially early on. And he missed those free throws, which really helped. I'm not sure what he finished, but it was like maybe just a smidge above 50% for the game. But the digs while in motion and moving with him as he's moving, not moving prior to him starting his spins or drop steps and all that kind of stuff, means that he has to make reads against motion while in motion. And he really did not succeed as a playmaker in that facet. Like, I think he disappointed in that regard. And some of Giannis's best plays are when he gets to see the defense adjusting to him and he gets to read it over the top and make those types of plays. And I think Giannis just was seeing, a lot of Pacers jump into the lane, but it started out in single coverage. And so he wasn't responding to the motion as well as I thought he might. And he may in the future of this series, but that was a big swing, I think, from his playmaking style. And that's not necessarily scheme or anything like that, but I was disappointed with his process in that regard. And also, he's just big pickup, long way away, trying to stretch to the rim. He probably felt like he was alone out there to some degree. That informed his playmaking decisions.
I think to a certain extent, if you had just looked at the box score, you would have thought that this was kind of the Jokic dichotomy, and that you have to decide, are we going to force him to try to be a scorer? Are we going to force him to be a playmaker? And yet when you watch the film back, that isn't really what was happening. Because, on the playoffs, sometimes in the past, teams have really resisted doubling Jokic because they don't want to get picked apart from his passes. The Pacers were still, as you mentioned, sending extra bodies in lots of situations. And while I did not wear the shirt, I honestly think that the biggest contributing factor in this is while Nembhard gets a lot of credit for how good he is at the point of attack, he doesn't always get the credit that he deserves as being one of the best off-ball defenders on the roster, if not the best off-ball defender.
Giannis started his spin. Nembhard is 18 feet away. When he finished his spin, Nembhard is present in front of him. He tracked back, and that's like some playmakers make that play to where Nembhard came from, but Giannis didn't. And Nembhard, he's special defender.
So the Nembhard film, as I said, nobody ever said it would be Nem easy. That is the title of the podcast. First of all, I want to point out what you pointed out in your gamer recap. This really has nothing to do with Giannis, but I just want to say the people's champion, the Pacers, did make an adjustment. They applied full court pressure against most of the ball handlers in this game, and when they did, oh, look, they can duck under the half-court screens. So that really didn't have to do with Giannis, but here, this is what I'm getting at when I said I think that the impression would have been that they were just forcing Giannis to score on islands, and in some coverages they were doing the 4-5 switching and having Miles against them, but they were very heavy coming across at the nail to stop. And what Tyrese is doing, and this is why I like watching Nembhard as an off-ball defender so much, more often than not, in his third year in the NBA, he is quarterbacking this defense a lot. So you can see him communicating to Obi here to go up to the wing so that they can rotate out of those coverages. It ends up being a missed three from Kuzma, and we will revisit what happened after that later on in this podcast. Another example, Siakam being very aggressive, shading Giannis to the left, as we predicted they would probably do, over, and then they want to go into angled pick and roll with Giannis one pass away. They want to short that roll, and this is Nembhard making a terrific read again where he knows that they're going to make that 7 pass to Lopez on the short roll, and he gets in front of it and intercepts it. He had a number of deflections in the second quarter in those types of ways where he made reads as an off-ball defender. It's that exact same play again, only they went to Giannis' side of the floor, and then they're going to double from the top. Nembhard reads that, good closeout so that they don't give up the three, and then puts the cork on the drive, and obviously a big help from Miles there deflecting the actual block there at the rim, and then Nembhard reading that post-entry pass to the rim. So some of that even goes back to when we covered the Knicks series a year ago, and what my point was about that is yes, Nesmith gave more length against Jalen Brunson, but an underrated aspect of taking Nembhard off of Jalen Brunson was that Nembhard was then in the shadows and was able to do a lot of the pouncing and the peel switching and stuff that he and Siakam are honestly the best two defenders at, and Siakam's made significant strides in that area since last year. But that was really what stood out to me the most, is some of those maybe perhaps you could say are rote passing reads or very paint by number in some situations by Giannis, but also it's Nembhard reading his eyes and knowing where the ball is going to go, and them being far more connected than what you would have seen from this defense at the beginning of the year. If you would have told me that you and I would be having a discussion about that defense being that connected, rotating out of doubles, communicating where they needed to go, swapping recovery paths, I've been like, no, we're not getting to that. We're not getting from point A to point B to this.
Yeah. And in addition to that too, the death knell probably was already landed, but Nembhard jumping Giannis, with a minute 50, 2 minutes left in the game for that traveling turnover. He and Siakam teaming up for that. Also, Siakam, I think, did a really good job of pushing out the catch points, making sure that Giannis, to have a guy like Nembhard show up in the lane, to be able to have effective rotation, you do need to push him out a little bit further so you can time that up with his steps and forcing the catches out a little bit farther. The double from the top is exactly what you want. You were showing the plays, which is good because most people, when they watch highlights, they don't see these types of film cut up. But if you just go to NBA advanced stats and watch the missed shots, you can see, a double from the top from Haliburton, who uses his length quite well in that regard, and see Pascal. It's a deeper catch, it's a bumped out catch. Haliburton doubles from the top. Giannis goes to that baseline fader that we talked about, but it's about 3 feet farther than how he likes it. He's missing it. It's just little things like that went well for the Pacers all game, and a credit to them because they were pretty diligent about doing it. They were The third quarter, back end, start of the fourth, we saw, they started to make headway. They got some 3-pointers to go down, but impressed. Good defense.
Next, we can just continue on the positive train. Very open-ended question. What else did you think that the Pacers did well or did better than what you expected them to do in this game?
So Mathurin, I thought I really enjoyed the ability that he's always shown to put his shoulder into somebody's chest, clear out space, whether it's Brook Lopez or whether it's AJ Green or whoever the hell, Ryan Rollins. I thought that went well because we talked about that a little bit before. That is like the Bucks are going to be a team that they want to get the Pacers into that swing, nothing much going. And Mathurin, even though he's 1 of 6 from 3, and there were a couple shots I would have asked him not to take were I the coach, I think that willingness and that aggression to take it into the teeth of the defense is important. The corner crash that he had and, subsequent foul from Brook Lopez, great. Supporting your center, Miles, by getting to the rim like that, good. The 45 cut he made where TJ found him and that was his first layup of the game. Like that kind of stuff, really important. Really happy with that. I thought Siakam was extremely impressive outside of the wedge roll stuff, which we'll get into later. And the 3-point shot went down, 3 of 5, and one of the misses touched every single part of the rim. TJ made the shots against his zone. I'm kind of teasing what we're going to talk about later, but it's just things that had to go well did. Things that the series will kind of rest on as it currently stands went well for the Pacers, swung that way. And Tyrese didn't make a 3. And that can swing the other way wildly because there was a lot of hand-wringing about Tyrese's shooting this season, and he still finished as, an elite shooter. There was hand-wringing about his shooting in last season's playoffs. He still finished as an elite shooter. It will come around, and the Pacers won the game where, it wasn't there. I know I'm beating, a dead horse by saying this, but I'm continuously impressed by the fact that the Pacers were able to do it.
There's also a lot of hand-wringing a lot of times about Tyrese's overall involvement in the offense, and this was another game where it's like, you might stop Tyrese, but you're not probably going to stop the machine of what the offense is and how it operates with him triggering it and with what reads he makes out of it. I think what I liked most about Mathurin and Jarace, because Jarace ended up having a role in this game. He did take some of the possessions against Giannis, and to his credit, it felt like the Pacers were kind of just intentionally fouling him almost at times. Like, we know we're not going to stay between you and the basket, and we'd rather just take the lower percentage shot of you at the free throw line. And I appreciate that some of those were actually like, this is very talk radio, but hard fouls from Jarace instead of like, hey, we're going to let you potentially get the and one out of this. So I like that. And I didn't think that he made any like egregious errors that popped off the film when I was watching it back.
You're now listening to Samson and Cooper, 105.7 Talk Radio. Yeah, man, I think they gotta play harder. They gotta want it more, man. And those hard fouls, they mean something.
You think we have a lot of Boston accents here in Indy?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it's kind of funny because our accents are probably actually quite close. The drawl in it. So I don't know why.
We're gonna revisit how you say against and I say against.
Yeah, I elongate everything. So it is. I don't know why.
I've been told that I have an Indiana accent, but I don't exactly know what that is. I suppose I do, but
I guess I don't think of talk radio as Indiana. I think of it as almost distinctly East Coast.
It's a separate entity.
Yeah, it's like a brash New York, Boston, Eastern Seaboard type deal.
But anyways, yeah, I mean, I didn't think that any of the stuff that Jarace did popped off the page for the wrong reasons, which I think is a positive for him, especially because if you can tell him, like, with what some of the motor issues have been, if you're telling him, like, look, you're only going to play this many minutes, this is exactly what we need you to do, go out there and play to exhaustion in those minutes, like, I think that's mostly what he did. And the same with Ben is that sometimes Ben can be, and as you mentioned, there was probably some of those shots, 1 or 2, that he might have even turned into a harder shot than what it would have initially been. But I didn't think he looked overly separate from the offense in this game either. He found his points naturally within the pace and within the scheme. So I thought that was positive from both of them. And then, not to make it an overly Nembhard pod, but Nembhard did have a strong start to the first quarter, obviously, with some of his driving. And you and I, when we did the mailbag podcast at the end of March, I pointed out to you, and somebody had asked, like, what does Nemb need to do to take his game to the next level, especially in minutes when Tyrese isn't on the floor? And I said I had noticed some ball handling issues with him, especially against teams, and not that many teams in the NBA readily play ice coverage anymore. But the Bucks were playing a lot of ice coverage in the first half yesterday. The Atlanta Hawks still play a lot of ice coverage, and this is even like for the majority of this game in Atlanta, Nembhard was being guarded by Dyson Daniels, which is of course a very difficult matchup, which he normally wouldn't have had if Tyrese had played. But I mean, this is Trae Young icing him right, and just seeing the juxtaposition when he had to snake from right to left versus when he finally backs this out and can just naturally dribble to his spot from mid-range to his left and pull up was very telling to me, and that continued toward the back end of the season. Yesterday when they were icing him, obviously Brook Lopez isn't really up close to the level, making that a tight space for him. But the patience here to connect with Lopez and then find Miles on this dive to the rim, I thought was really terrific from him and better than what I had seen in a lead ball handling role. There again, using physicality against Giannis off that screen from Obi Toppin.
He's so
This
tough.
and this, to Miles's credit, this was actually against zone here in the second half. And I like that Miles twice made this read against the 2-3 to flash to the top, especially because on the second time, it didn't really seem to me that the entire Bucks team knew whether they wanted to play man or zone. Because if you're in the pick and pop, Brook Lopez isn't going to go to the top of a key out of a 2-3 zone to go cover Miles, and yet Kevin Porter Jr.'s feeling the tension and staying attached to Tyrese. So I like that they were just bringing Miles to the top of the 2-3 and keeping that somewhat simple. Overall, I can let people know the Pacers did score 1.286 points per chance on 14 zone possessions yesterday. Those numbers look pretty good. I think that zone coverage would hopefully be better from the Milwaukee Bucks if they watch that back, because you could see that Brook Lopez was very confused there as to why he was being expected to play from the middle of the zone up to the top. And as you briefly touched on, TJ did make, the pull-up twos out of that motion set that I told you that the Pacers have been running. They weren't necessarily getting anything on the backside of that, and that's good. Like, it's good to make the shots that the defense gives you, but also the shots that the defense gives you in zone are typically mid-range twos and pull-up twos. So I'm not exactly sure that you want to subsist on that. That is something that Rick Carlisle touched on briefly in the presser, that he said they should be ready to see more zone. And I don't even think it's so much why he's thinking that. I don't even think it's so much a factor of, hey, the Bucks might have found something here. They like the zone better than the other options, as much as, hey, the starting lineup for the Bucks really didn't work very well at all, and they may need to play smaller. And if they need to play smaller, they may need to play more zone. So we should be prepared to see that.
I think also, like, the coach's job is to try and help create those better shots, especially against something like zone. So obviously Rick is going to be mindful of that. And in the playoffs, the Pacers, they took a game. They're 25% of the way there, and they did it by beating zone, TJ and Pascal in particular, during that stretch to bump the lead back up to 21 after it was at like 15. It was a really good stretch for them, and it was built off of tough shots. You don't have to keep making tough shots the whole time. You can put it away, put the feather in your cap. We did it. We can look for something better now. And they will have to look for better things, because you don't want 7 games of like, yeah, we're going to have a 4-minute stretch that's like, it's either make it or break it, depending on if, TJ shoots 71.7% from the floor or something like that on strictly pull-up jumpers. We'll see. But yeah, Miles flashing up I thought was great. Miles, also not mentioned in the Giannis coverage, but held in a couple times really well. And, it's a team defense with Giannis at any point in time, but the strip was really good. He forced higher pickups a couple times the same way Jarace did. And it is like, you just got to put a body on him. And there has to be multiple guys doing it, because it's going to be tough for Giannis to go a full series, just 35, 36 points, constantly going to the line, doing all that kind of stuff. But it's also very tough on the other end. They need to split up that assignment. So, yeah, good stuff. Not perfect, but the Pacers get to counter things the same way that the Bucks do as well.
Other things that went well that I actually didn't point out in that limiting Giannis as a playmaker thing, and how much time we spent talking about Pascal's stamina. To talk about Pascal a little bit, something that they did different is that they were not having Pascal pick Giannis up as the bring-up ball handler. Yep. He was back with his heels about, right outside the arc or inside the arc, rather than having him pressure full court. I thought that was good for reserving some of his energy, in addition to giving reps to Nesmith and to Jarace. and then doing some of the switching with Miles and some of the other stuff that they tried. And, I mean, you could see it. The one possession where he slipped and fell, and then he chased down Giannis and poked it from behind, and then he immediately made a three. That's like the winning possession of, hey, Pascal still has the energy to keep doing this. Unlike what we saw at the end of the third quarter and some of the film on the second night of back-to-backs, but also something else that I liked from Pascal. This isn't a lineup that the Pacers would have played a ton during the regular season because it's Jarace, Obi, and Pascal all together with Benedict Mathurin and TJ. You can see right at the top that pretty much no one knows what anyone else is doing because Pascal thinks they're running C, which is like a vertical chase screen that comes up from the corner. He thinks he's going to go set that for TJ and potentially get a mismatch against AJ Green. And everybody else is like running their slice play, which is what Samson and I typically refer to as the 77 skip action. So I don't know if somebody made a call from the floor and somebody else made a call from the bench, but they were literally running two different plays at the same time. They're still not organized because if they were running the 77 skip, then Ben or Jarace should have set a go screen for TJ and relocated to the corner, but they're finally into it. There's going to be a ram screen to get Pascal to be the first screener, and then they're going to skip it to Obi for TJ to go get it. Obi even gets that mismatch finally against AJ Green. The spacing still isn't ideal. And Pascal's just like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to salvage all this by banging in a three. And like, that's what he's able to do now. Like, we've talked about his 3-level scoring before, but like when I used to go over to your website and do podcasts about the Raptors, when Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes and Pascal were on the same team, I remember us spending a lot of energy discussing like, how are they going to make this half-court offense work? And the fact that he can do that from above the break at the top of the key, it makes things a lot easier for him and the rest of the team, even though that possession didn't look particularly easy.
Yeah, it's a good comparison because Obi Toppin would have been like either Scotty or OG Anunoby potentially, and that's where the Raptors would have kept the play because they would not have been expecting anyone besides Fred VanVleet, for example, to bail them out at the top of the three-point arc and just bang it in. But Pascal, that late bank he hit, like the pole, and it was like it kissed almost the very top of the glass before falling in. The one-legged floater, 2 of 2 from the line after the flagrant, 3 of 5 from downtown. Did not demand much of the offense, but was clinical when it fell to him. Like 10 of 15 shooting, he was very strong. And he was what, plus 28 or something like that. He's obviously, we've seen the on-offs show it, and the film shows it. He's absolutely imperative to the success of the defense. He had a whale of a game in the Pacers fashion, because the Pacers don't really have a lot of 30-plus scoring. They do it as a team, and they try and work through their concepts, so much so that if you go for 25 as a Pacer, it means like you did the damn thing. Except Mathurin. Mathurin sometimes can be like, I'm going for 25, man, you know?
I mean, I think what else too here is that I think that the Pacers had a very strong performance, and I think if I were them, I'd be absolutely thrilled with what that first half was yesterday for a number of reasons. But also, if we're being honest, like part of the reason why their plus minus looks so strong for the starters is because the plus minus for the Bucks starters was quite poor. Minus 15 and 17 minutes played. Kyle Kuzma did like a lot of light cardio, I guess, didn't record anything in the box score. Doc Rivers said afterwards that they need to do a better job of getting him involved, that he didn't have enough touches. Taurean Prince, I don't fully know why he's in the starting lineup. It didn't really sound like Doc Rivers was overly pressed to make a change to that, and maybe he doesn't need to be if they're expecting Damian Lillard to play in Game 2, but would you be at all surprised if they ran back that exact same starting lineup against the Pacers in Game 2?
I'd be kind of, and again, Doc Rivers is a very successful NBA coach who knows infinitely more about basketball than I do, but I'd be surprised and like, whoa, if they ran it back. Maybe has more faith in those guys than he does in like AJ Green and Gary Trent Jr., who I thought had awesome games. I thought even defensively, I thought both of them held in extremely well. Those guys, maybe I don't see enough of them, but if they get like that performance in half of the games this series, it just helps them so much. And some coaches would reward that, and especially with the Bucks having so much trouble with their starting lineup over the course of the season, like that lineup his lost minutes. So I don't know. I guess I'd be surprised a little bit if it's there, because there's only however many games in the series. You have to maximize things.
The only thing I can figure there, and this is going to seem like an odd comparison, is maybe it's somewhat like the World Cup team that Tyrese played on, where they just liked the fit of that bench unit with, Tyrese and Cam Johnson and other runners and moving targets around him so much that they liked bringing all those guys off the bench, Austin Reeves as well. That maybe they like the current, maybe it's that they know, like maybe, Torian Prince and Kyle Kuzma may not make that much sense as starters, but maybe they make less sense as bench players if it's going to disrupt that smaller ball closing lineup that they're finishing the fourth quarters with anyways, because they like playing those five guys together so much.
There have been good teams. There's been Raptors teams. There's been Knicks teams that definitely win games with their bench, but those teams don't go far.
Yeah.
So that's during the regular season, having like a slick, awesome bench and just kind of like running the stars out there to eat some minutes can work fine. In a playoff series, though, like I understand the logic.
Yeah.
I'm just pushing back against it. If I'm in the room with Doc, I'm advocating for like, let's maybe these guys play a couple more minutes a game. Maybe we try and maximize things early.
Yeah, I mean, if I were them, I think they have to start Gary Trent Jr. in the next game, but that's just what I would personally be doing, especially because the next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is I want to get your opinions on what the Pacers were doing against Kevin Porter Jr., because I thought if there's anything that the Pacers are going to rewatch this film on and be like, here's one or two things that we're expecting there might be more of, or the Bucks might lean into more, that would probably be it to me.
Can I also say quickly
yeah.
before, just because this is a new listener base and Raptors fans know this, but Gary Trent Jr. was a fan of my style, my fashion, and told me while he was in Toronto. So I just want everybody to know that.
So one of the actions that I think stood out the most when I was looking back over the film that I thought gave the Pacers problems, and I was a bit surprised that the Bucks didn't run it a bit more, was just, if people don't know, it's a shallow cut under with AJ Green under the pick and roll between Kevin Porter Jr. and Giannis. And what stands out in this possession is because it's small ball versus small ball, they were giving Jarace some of the reps against Giannis when he's a screener here. Then you're going to see AJ Green make that shallow cut that's intended to remove the nail help and distort the potential tags for the Pacers. And as Samson and I talked about during the preview, TJ did have some struggles during the regular season matchups with Kevin Porter Jr.'s size and getting overwhelmed at the point of attack. So when he gets downhill, he keeps going downhill. And I thought you could kind of tell a little moment where TJ was kind of expecting Pascal to somehow teleport all the way from the weak side and that TJ was going to peel to Gary Trent. But that seems like a really big ask to me, where there's some frustration there. They go away from that action for a bit, but the Pacers made an adjustment. They took TJ off of Kevin Porter Jr. and put Benedict Mathurin on him, which I think is the best move with this lineup out there. And to Ben's credit, he does have more size, and his on-ball defense is generally ahead of his off-ball defense. And he got through some of these screens better than what you were seeing from TJ, at least on the prior possession, albeit against a different play type. Able to put the cork on the ball some. The one downside to that is AJ Green's going to have size over TJ McConnell too, just as a shooter when he's contesting. But I think you're probably okay with that more than what you were seeing at the point of attack. The problem with Ben is that when you watch a lot of his film as a screen navigator, if he can't press up and get through the screen, sometimes some of Ben's defense can kind of be described as like he'll have a strong initial thrust and then he relaxes. And that can mean that he misses these veer switches where he's supposed to be running the seam in front of Bobby Portis here. He doesn't do it, so then that's an easy drop-off. On the very next possession, they took Ben off of Kevin Porter Jr., put Jarace onto him, and put Ben onto Gary Trent, and then he ends up getting clipped bad enough on this screen that they immediately took Ben out of the game. So I kind of foresee some ongoing issues here because just to put a cap on it, here's that same shallow action in the second half. This time, Tyrese is guarding AJ Green. Kevin Porter's going to get downhill because Pascal does not want to let even a handoff of Giannis slipping to the rim. And now Ben's fouling him at the basket. And what I'll point out after this happened is you could see communication. Jenny is the defensive coordinator for the Pacers. You could see communication from the bench. And while I hope my interpretation is correct, I think what she wanted him to do, I think she wants Pascal to take a slide step with the ball to divert. And Pascal, you can see kind of motioning and being like, here in a minute. He's going to go. He's going to dart to the rim. So something that they have to consider there as far as how they're going to negotiate those shallow cuts, especially if Ben Shepherd's going to be out of the rotation. And I don't know, might have to do with the toe, might not, but he didn't play in game 1. Next to Nemhard, he is their stickiest defender at the point of attack. His contests always don't have as much effect as you would want, but in terms of staying with the ball, he's their next best option. I don't think it can be any more TJ. The numbers against TJ in the half-court defensive matchups versus Kevin Porter Jr. were not good. So if it's going to be Mathurin, what are your thoughts on that like shallow cut debate there?
I do, man. I think part of, and we'll get into this later, sticking with Giannis there if you're Pascal and not really like that slide step over, that is also really just at the crux of it, like a defensive rebounding solve as well. And I think like it's the playoffs. Mathurin, I'd give it a longer look because you can see there are some very clear wins and there's some very clear capability to kind of buffer that play as far as like the on-ball stuff. And I would lean there. Things would have to go wrong continuously for me to look elsewhere. I would ask Mathurin to kind of like hang in a little bit more.
So you'd keep the coverage the same, and you'd expect better point of attack defense from Mathurin.
I would hope. I don't know about expect, but I'd hope. I think. Yeah.
Can I show you a potential third option?
I'd love to see a potential third option.
Okay. Potential third option, a very old throwback here from when the Pacers were still a rebuilding team. Somebody that you will recognize.
He's still my beating heart. It's Ochai Abashi.
And it's Jordan Nwora still playing for the Indiana Pacers. George Hill's chasing over at the point of attack, and the Jazz are going to run pretty much that same shallow cut action. What I found was interesting is I actually think this is the first game that George Hill and Nwora played for the Pacers after they coincidentally got traded from the Milwaukee Bucks to the Pacers. And they pretty readily communicated this well, where Nwora is effectively in a next. Like his defender was the shallow cutter, but he takes the ball and then George Hill peels back. That's somewhat compelling to me if we look back at the other clip. I think it's kind of risky to let go of Giannis, not only because of the risk of the slip, but here, like part of why it's problematic is Tyrese is the player guarding AJ Green on the shallow cut.
Yeah.
Like if you borrow from what Nwora and Jordan Hill just did and you're going to transpose it onto this clip, Tyrese would jump switch onto Kevin Porter Jr. and Mathurin would peel back to AJ Green and Siakam would just stay attached to Giannis. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about that coverage in general as an adjustment against this action? And how would you feel about it if you put Tyrese onto Gary Trent Jr. and put Jarace onto AJ Green instead, because they only used AJ as the shallow cutter. They weren't using Gary Trent Jr. as the shallow cutter.
I mean, I don't know. Like switching is always great when people hang in after the switch. Like switching is great to just bounce people back out. I mean, it happens against every team and good players do it all the time. But I mean, I don't know if they would do it differently based on like where it is in the clock. But if it's like the first action and you get that switch of like Tyrese, then like what's stopping them from just bringing like Giannis over once more without a shallow cut and just like seeing where that goes? I don't know. I think there's probably, it's about finding the right mix. It definitely could work, but I wouldn't want to put Tyrese on the ball, and I wouldn't want to start the rigmarole of like the switching him out repeatedly. But maybe I'm being a little bit too conservative.
Oh, it's not me saying a pre-switch. It's me saying you're literally swapping the matchup. You'd put Jarace deliberately on AJ Green. You'd put Jarace deliberately on AJ Green, put Tyrese just on Gary Trent Jr. so he can defend weak side corner. Then when Kevin Porter Jr. is turning the corner, Jarace would jump switch onto the ball and Mathurin would peel to AJ Green.
Okay,
you're using the same Nwora George Hill coverage.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah. No, that's I'd be interested to see how the Bucks reacted to it, but yeah.
Because my thinking here is like when you're watching teams defend stack pick and roll, the Raptors run some of the most stack pick and roll in the entire NBA. How do most teams guard stack?
I guess it's like a change. Well, I don't know. Do you have the numbers on how they've guarded this year? Because it's changed over the past however long.
No, I don't. I mean, I think that the majority of teams still switch the guards and drop the big around the back screen. I mean, that's what the Pacers do pretty much universally. So if you're already used to doing that against stack, it seems like that would be pretty easy to replicate against the shallow cut. You're just switching the guards and keeping the big with the screener.
Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood the premise.
No, I mean, I wasn't saying to pre-switch. I think that would be a pretty complicated rotation if you're trying to pre-switch Tyrese out of it. I don't think that you could cover enough ground. But
yeah,
that's my thought. And I guess my other thought is for Bucks fans who might be listening to this, I don't really know why they didn't run that more times. It caused problems for the Pacers. Most teams run shallow cuts under pick and rolls, and I've seen it cause problems before against other opponents. So I think that sometimes they underutilize AJ Green as a shooter within this offense in terms of not even just necessarily getting him shots, but using his movement more to manipulate what they were doing on the court. And also that just gives Giannis a different attack point.
He was really impressive. Even when they were trying to clear out space for Pascal to go against AJ, like AJ a couple times just like fouled the hell out of him. But AJ is really strong. He bumped him out. He held like his location decently well. And the 5 of 11 performance from downtown, a lot of those threes were very difficult. He didn't get a lot of easy looks in this game. Movement, like sprinting into a spot, rising up over guys. It was just like, yeah, AJ, there's a lot of meat on that bone for the Bucks going forward, I think.
So if we go to crunch time, the other thing that stood out to me is, as expected, that Kevin Porter, Gary Trent, AJ, Giannis, Portis lineup, they shot 4 of 14 from 3, and they were still +4 in 15.6 minutes played, with a lot of that time coming in the second half. And some of that might have been somewhat the Pacers letting their foot off the gas a little bit, because obviously they were coming into the second half with a really big lead. But they mix in some zone. They will play more zone if they intend on going small more. And then also in the fourth quarter, they pretty much went to switch everything, which is a departure from what they were doing in the first half. Obviously, when Brook Lopez was on the floor, they were playing a ton of ice coverage on both the right and the left side of the floor against Tyrese in particular. But even when Lopez wasn't on the floor, they weren't doing as much switching as what they did in the fourth quarter. So we've talked about it before. I think that the best coverage that you can try to contain what Tyrese does as a decision maker is the switching. So what do you think the Bucks will do more switching in game 2? Did you think that it limited the Pacers more so than what you saw in the first half? And not just by the numbers, but by what Tyrese's attack processes were.
I do think that, and Tyrese had a couple like really nice possessions of just kind of, I have to put my head down. I have to get a shot up. Like I have to be able to apply that pressure. I thought that was nice. I thought that there have been games that I've watched Tyrese play where the shot doesn't go down, and that's definitely added for some passivity. But I didn't find him to be passive that much in this past game. I thought he still tried to make things happen like a lot and still looked for his own shot, which is good because the Pacers need that. I think they will switch more, and it will be up to guys like Pascal to like really make a killing. Maybe a guy like Obi factors in a little bit more, being able to like attack those as well. I mean, Obi was by the numbers an elite post-up scorer because of not that he's a guy you just toss it into and he makes things happen, but because of opportunistic and just beating the hell out of a smaller guy. The Bucks will have quite a few guys who he could attack in that fashion. And there's like the switch pocket you talk about, right? It's like there's room to attack it. There's room. You get smaller angles, and there are guys who are better at mining those angles for the precious minerals that sit in the offense of it. And Mathurin could be somebody who does that too, as long as there's not like a bunch of catch and hold. But it's like, if you're going to do the swapping matchups, everyone's switching out, there needs to be guys who punish that. And so, whether it's Haliburton at the back end of the play, if he gets maybe a big on him, or whether it's Pascal, Mathurin, even Nemhard, guys kind of going to work. If I were the Bucks, I would probably want to make the Pacers do that just to move them out of their normal process, which is quite elite and which features Haliburton as an incredible decision maker.
Hey, you know what? At my website, patreon.com/basketball, she wrote, when Samson's talking about Mathurin in some of those situations, in some of the close late games that the Pacers played where they were virtually in their own March Madness for about a week and a half, that was something that they leaned into against teams that went small in the fourth quarter and did a lot of switching, especially when Tyrese was out, just to get some downhill momentum. So their play Omaha, that's just a slot to slot flip. But team switches it. Ben can normally get a step, or he can even go and dribble into a bully drive and get into a post up
Yep.
sometimes in certain situations. So that is something that they could look at there. I did want to talk to you because we've done several podcasts this season. I've told you many times that if I was going to say what their go-to action is in the fourth quarter, it is
Yeah.
almost always the wedge roll between Nembhard, Tyrese, and Siakam in some combination with Turner and Nesmith or Turner and Mathurin dotting the weak side. They go to that fairly often in the fourth quarter. The Pacers ran that a few times in the fourth quarter against the Bucks. They did not score points out of it. So
Yep.
just to give people like a little refresher on what I'm talking about here when we say wedge roll. Now, here against the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm using this clip for a reason. It's either going to be Nembhard or Tyrese as the ball handler there over on the left side of the court. And then depending upon who's guarding who, they will use the other guard to come up and set that wedge screen around the elbow area where Pascal's going to have an option. If his defender ducks under, he will normally then just go straight across and set the quote unquote wedge roll, because then that defender is going to be out of position to guard the ball screening action for Nembhard. If that defender doesn't go under, or they potentially switch it, then he might slide directly to the block because he's going to have a mismatch. So there's a lot of reads in play. All three guys have very high feel, typically, can find the weak links here. So in this case, they end up switching the wedge roll between Siakam and Nembhard. Siakam posts up. The Sixers were pretty quick here to scram out that mismatch. And something I liked is that Miles immediately went and
Yep.
relocated to the top of the key. They do their pacer stuff and keep moving between actions, and eventually Pascal makes a three out of it. I'm just rolling this thing of clips here so that people can see. They will go to this multiple times in a row in the fourth quarter, and they will get different looks out of it. Here it's a repost 2 times in a row against the mismatch. Siakam turns and fires and scores, and then they end up flipping the roles when the Sixers switch the matchups, and now Tyrese is the ball handler. Nembhard practically acting like a linebacker there. When they went to the Bucks, and here's where I'll let you hop in. They went to this with 2.5 minutes to go, about thereabouts. Nembhard's the wedge roll screener. Giannis is guarding Siakam. Siakam potentially can go screen for Tyrese. So why on these couple handful of possessions do you think that the Pacers really didn't get anything out of these plays in the same way that we were just looking at, despite the fact that, Pascal did get to relatively the same jump shot there over the top of Gary Trent Jr. He just ends up missing it, if you want me to wind it back.
Yeah. So this is we talked a little bit about this prior to the podcast, and you said there's a difference in analysis is that oftentimes you will do it kind of like a coach, and I will think about it more so from like what I expect from players to perform in, let's say, one-on-one matchups, or kind of what is available to players. And when they ran this, I actually didn't find that Pascal had a bunch of success as a singular guy. He hit the deck on one of the plays, like when he hit the rocker step on Gary and tried to go left. He lost the handle, went to the floor, and they had to, shovel the ball out, and Tyrese missed a floater. That play was there, and that's just like a lack of execution, because Pascal did get the step, and he would have been able to like head into the paint with real momentum against a moving defense. And then the other one is just like, I do think he bailed out a little bit. It's too early in the clock for him to settle into that shot against Gary, I think. But also it's like the weak side has to be good in what they're timing up. And when it's just like, I'm pretty sure the play, Nesmith and Nembhard both fill to the corner at the same time. Miles gets caught up on like this pin-in type screen that becomes like a flash, but it's just nothing is timed super well. And Miles flashes middle when, Pascal is already in that jumper motion. It's just, there's no big mistakes there. It's just in the playoffs, you have to be pretty, like everything has to time up kind of properly, and you have to be really good to beat teams. So it's a great play. Obviously you showed they can get a lot of great offense out of it, and there's a lot of optionality. But I think that the play went to Pascal repeatedly and just kind of ended there, even if the ball moved on. They didn't get continuous motion out of it. They didn't get the advantages that they really, really want. And that can definitely improve. I just think it went poorly in that game, which is why they didn't score out of it.
So to point out, when the Bucks are doing a lot of switching here, Giannis didn't go under the wedge roll from Nemhard. He stayed with Siakam, and then they switched on the screen between Siakam and Tyrese. So Tyrese has Giannis on him now. He still gets the ball to Siakam, but it's not going to be at the block. It's going to be at the elbow, which is all right because Siakam likes that. But as you said, the weak side stuff is interesting to me because they're flooding over. Bobby Portis doesn't care what's going on down there at all. Like, he's going to meet Siakam. Miles does try to set that corner pin in. Something that would be interesting to me here is, and I haven't seen them do this out of this particular play type, but if Nemhard goes strong side corner while that post up is happening, corner cut to strong side corner, and then Miles is setting a corner pin in for Aaron to replace Nemhard in the corner. Because, like, when you're looking at Bobby Portis and Kevin Porter Jr. there, one of them's probably going to go with Nemhard if he's going to be wide open in the opposite corner, one pass away from Siakam. Yep. At the very least, then you're going to be 2 versus 2. And as soon as you're 2 versus 2, you're going to be able to create an advantage on the backside if Miles is going to set that screen. So that's maybe one little tweak I would look at, because I haven't seen a lot of teams completely flood off of that towards Siakam. I mean, he is capable of turning and making that shot. But then the next one that you pointed out, when he does kind of slip and fall there, same coverage where they're switching Giannis onto Tyrese and he gets Gary again. But then look at Bobby. He's clear. He's going to be clear. Even if Siakam had maintained his footing, he's going to be clear over there doubling on Siakam's catch virtually. And one thing that I'll point out here, just as a reference with that Nemhard cut, is there's another example, which I don't really need the clip of, but they were playing the Chicago Bulls, and the Bulls went to double Siakam on just a basic clear cut from Nemhard. Kobe White's like, okay, we've doubled. I'm going to rotate out to it. He thinks that Nemhard's going to be in the dunker, but Nemhard doesn't stay in the dunker. He makes that exact spot, that exact cut from the dunker to the strong side corner, and he's wide open because it very much confused the rotations. It's not a natural cut that people see behind a post up. And I actually clipped that at the time, and somebody that you're familiar with, who that cut is named after, Danny Green, I credit it and was like, what a tremendous Danny Green cut. And Danny Green saw it. And it was like, you know, thanks for paying tribute to this. To which point then I went looking for Danny Green cuts, because he made a ton of those in the finals and around Joel Embiid. And I think that's something that's interesting, just to try to manipulate that coverage, because they do like that play type so much. And I do like involving, you know, their 3 highest feel players all in the same action at once late in games. The switching does disrupt it more than when teams just, you know, try to ice the wedge roll or try to play soft coverage against it. So I think you could potentially manipulate some of the help defense in addition to just executing it better. But it did stand out to me because, like, I can let people know more often than not, they might not always score points out of that play. They almost always get a good shot out of that play.
And they didn't. And it's just, it is about timing and like interpretive action, because even though Portis flashes to where Pascal would have been had he kept his feet, if Miles is more like proactive in his cut middle, I mean, that's an easy read. And then it's him versus like a small low man, and it's a bucket probably. And that's NBA offense is, a lot of times it does seem like a guy making or missing a shot, but how things are timed up is paramount to success all the time. And only once you slow it down and kind of look at it do you see how much that it's probably why Danny Green was so thankful that you pointed it out, because it's a slick little thing to do. He's cool, by the way. For any Pacers fans listening, he's really nice and he's a really cool guy. And it was cool to watch him win a championship in Toronto. That's great. Yeah.
Aren't you just going to think about, like, when somebody asks you someday, like, who was a key role player on a ton of championship caliber teams? Like, Danny Green just proliferates across them all. Like, that's kind of the archetype that makes sense on almost every deep playoff team. Somebody who's a movement shooter who can also guard ones. I feel like that can fit in literally anywhere.
Yeah, and then you can supercharge it to a guy like Derek White or something. And then you can, it's the, what is it? It's like the, I don't know if you're big into Pokemon, but it's like Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard. Derek White is like Charizard. Danny Green is Charmeleon. And Charmander is maybe like Keon Ellis a little bit, maybe. I don't know. That archetype is extremely
Is this like
good
the
in the
equivalent of
NBA.
going from like Şengün to Sabonis to Jokic?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know what any of the words meant, but I feel like a lot of the people listening to the podcast will and will probably appreciate
You
that
had no
reference.
experience with Pokemon? Zero?
No. The only experience I have with any Pokemon is like playing Super Smash Brothers when you could play as Pikachu. That's the only thing I know. Pikachu is pretty elite in that game. You could do a lot of
Pikachu
things
is
with
really
him.
good. Wait, are you good at Smash Bros?
I haven't played the most recent one, but I used to play him on the older Gummy. I don't have it for Switch. I have a Switch.
But you just talking about like which characters are good, and Pikachu is in a couple games considered like S tier, right? Like he's an excellent. I guess Pikachu could be a girl. Pikachu could be anything.
I have a lot more experience in the Mario Party genre. I've played
Okay.
that I don't know how many times with my nephew. He wants to challenge me to that quite often. My go-to is Yoshi on that game. Yoshi is elite. Yoshi is elite.
Yeah.
Okay,
cool.
so the last thing that I wanted to bring up from this game that's not Mario related, I don't think, is the possession war. So it stood out to me at halftime that the Pacers had 2 total turnovers, which a big way that they have improved their defense and their game overall is by how much they've limited turnovers. But still, only having 2.5 of a playoff game is quite impressive. And at the same time, the Milwaukee Bucks had 1 offensive rebound at halftime. So, like, if you want to create the recipe for a blowout, outscoring your opponent's total for the game 22-5 in fast break points while they only get 8 offensive rebounds and you barely turn the ball over. So, from the Bucks side of things, and if you're the Pacers moving forward, they didn't limit the Pacers' fast break points at all. Like, the Denver Nuggets led the NBA in fast break points per game with 20.1. The Pacers had 22 in this game. So you weren't slowing them down in that category, and you also weren't getting offensive rebounds. So would you tilt that one way or the other? Are you hoping to stop the Pacers' fast break? Are you wanting to crash more?
I'm trying to crash more. Yeah. And I think the Dame thing helps that out a lot if Dame comes back, because it's what we talked about at the top. Giannis is starting with the ball, seeing an extra body by the end of his possession. He can't go through 2 guys and then go through 2 guys and then get the rebound. It's just like he can't provide that pressure on his own. Brook Lopez can carve out space if he's in the proximity of the basket, but the Bucks are obviously not exactly using him that way. They're trying to maximize Giannis's space. They're trying to be mindful of all that kind of stuff. And Kuzma could be like a corner crash, grab stuff guy, but he was just nothing.
And so he only had 2 touches, Samson.
and so like Kuzma could improve that stuff quickly if he applies himself and hunts those things. But yeah, like, I don't know. I've covered Gary Trent Jr. I don't think he's going to be the guy to go get him. KPJ, probably not. AJ Green, probably not a ton. It points towards one guy, Giannis, who's going to like really shake that up. And they are relying on that guy to begin every possession and hopefully end every possession for them. So it's just, I don't know how they walk that line until Dame is back, to be quite honest with you.
I mean, I think most Pacer fans who are listening to this will know that rebounding is something that the Pacers coaching staff has harped on repeatedly throughout this season.
Important.
If the Pacers have a weakness that recurs, it's what they do on the glass. Like that showed up in games last year when they were playing the New York Knicks, right? Like if the Knicks got a bunch of offensive rebounds, it probably wasn't going to be a great game for the Pacers. And that was something that they had to really drill home on the off days in between that series. The Bucks this year, 30th in offensive rebounding rate following a missed 3, 30th in possessions per game when they had sent at least 2 players crashing, 30th in crash rate, 30th in hustle on rebounds, which those are like proprietary numbers that get calculated based on how much players improve their positioning to the glass. This is all very schematic, and this is something that Doc Rivers holds very deep. If you watched, the 2008 Celtics that won a title, if you watched the 2010 Celtics that went to Game 7 against the Lakers, if you watch any Doc Rivers team, he does not really believe in sending people to the offensive glass. They will typically, When the shot goes up, everybody's going back. And that was clearly what the strategy was intended to be yesterday. But it didn't really play out that way. And if I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, the Pacers, on the whole, they rank 18th in opponent offensive rebounding rate. You and I talked about it when we did the 2 games against the Raptors, and what was one of the things that I told you about why that was a bad matchup? It was because the Toronto Raptors were very good at rebounding their own missed threes. And I was like, if you're good at rebounding your own missed threes, you're probably going to generate a lot of 50-50 opportunities against the Pacers. That's going to be problematic. They actually did improve in that category slightly by the end of the season, because I think over like the first month they would have been in the bottom 5, but they finished 20th on their opponent or their offensive rebounding rate following an opponent missed 3. But that's generally a valid strategy against them. And I just have to think, if I'm the Bucks, I want to crash a little bit more, because I actually think it's going to help their transition defense. Well, and that's kind of what the final evolution of this, possession war is. That in a lot of respects, sometimes going and crashing the glass can actually be more of a help to your transition defense than just running and getting back, especially against this Pacer team, because they are so good with the advance pass. Like they will throw the ball overhead faster than you can get back a lot of times. So
it's all one floor, not 2 sides. You apply pressure where you can, and typically, you're not going to win games being purely reactive. You have to go force something. So yeah, getting on the glass. I mean, I've watched Raptors teams that were really good at offensive rebounding and really good at transition defense. A couple different iterations of it. You and I, one of the first podcasts we did this year, we're talking about tagging up and the different ways that you can force, and inform pace through how you attack the offensive glass. And I'll be very interested to see how this develops over the course of the series, because I don't know, offensive rebounding is a huge deal. It's a really big deal. Underrated aspect of NBA basketball.
Because the Pacers were 10-5 this year when they held their opponent to 8 offensive rebounds or less. Like that, if they can control the glass, there's a good chance that they're going to win the basketball game. Mm-hmm. So when Samson's talking about tagging up, this was actually the clip that I prepared. And
excellent.
People are probably thinking to themselves, Caitlin, why are we watching more clips of the lottery bound Philadelphia 76ers? I have a point. So this was the 3rd game of the year, and the Nick Nurse Sixers were very aggressive. That they put up a ton of threes in this game because Embiid wasn't playing. They were playing very small. Anytime a missed 3 goes up, I want everybody to watch what they did. So they intentionally ran at the backs of the Pacers on every missed 3. That's what tagging up is. You're essentially trying to scrum. You're trying to push them into the lane. And it's not even necessarily to get an offensive rebound. It's a transition defense scheme. You might create a 50-50 opportunity, as they do here. And if you get the offensive rebound, great. And in this case, the Pacers were turning 50-50 balls into like 80-20 balls. Like the hustle in this game was just not good. But that's something that you can exploit against them at times, and they did it. I think that the Sixers were undersized in this game, and they ended up with like 20 offensive rebounds in a lot of cases. And because they also cut back on how many of those advanced passes the Pacers were able to throw, because if you're running at the back, you're already on the high side rather than them beating you down the floor. So sometimes there's games, like I said, that you can watch where the teams that are the better offensive rebounding teams have a better chance at limiting the Pacers in transition, which would make sense, because if you convert the putback, then it's obviously a make anyways, but in part because of that scheme. Now watch the difference with the Bucks, which they had a ton of missed threes yesterday, and they weren't sending, like, this is that clip that we talked about earlier where Kuzma's going to get that kind of grenade 3, one of his 2 touches on the day. And when the shot goes up, watch the Bucks. Not a single person even pursues the glass. And yet still, Nemhard, as the only person bringing the ball up, all 5 Bucks should theoretically be back. Days. And yet that's when he's going to literally use the decel and bump Lopez completely out of ground. And that's what I'm getting at. Like, if you were going to be this poor, limiting fast break points, then why not send, 1 or 2 people more than what you did? But like, that's easy for me to say, but clearly that's antithetical to what Doc thinks of this roster and what Doc thinks as a coach across multiple rosters. Because like I said, I filtered to look at which teams sent at least 2 players crashing the most, and the Bucks ranked 30th in that during the regular season.
Yeah, they don't like it.
So if they did it, it would be a surprise. But I think that they have to do something, especially if Dame doesn't play in game 2, to alter the complexion of this matchup.
I think the way it looks right now, is that the Pacers are in a really, really strong position on several fronts. And Dame, as you said, can be the thing. But watching game one and watching how things, because you can hypothesize things until it manifests in playoff matchups, but the Pacers, they're winning a lot of stuff. And not even because it's just like overwhelming shooting luck. It's like, nope, the game is playing out this way, and it seems like it could do that going forward. But Dame obviously throws a lot of different things into whack. I'll be very interested to see when he arrives, because I'm sure he will at some point this series.
Yeah, I mean, if I was the Bucks, I would be not starting one of Prince or Kuzma, which could naturally happen if Dame is back. I'd hope I'm getting a boost from Dame to take off some of everything that Giannis is happening to do, and I would be sending more people to crash. If I'm the Pacers, I would kind of be anticipating that. I would be anticipating seeing more zone, because I think that the Bucks are going to lean into the smaller lineups even more than what they did in this game. I would be expecting that I need to have a little bit more pristine execution against some of the switches. And overall, I'm feeling pretty good about what we did in game one. Obviously, you don't want to live off of that because every game takes on a unique character to its own. But I was really impressed with everything the Pacers did in this game. It was actually work for me to come up with things that I thought like, hey, this could be better, because so much of it went well and went to what I think that their overall game plan was intended to be.
You need to come over to my side of the road, the optimist side of the road. I just come on this podcast and be like, I think the Pacers will be all right. And they prove me right. I don't always know the method.
I don't know what your approach is, but like in my writing, my intent is always to just be descriptive of what happened. That's my preference. I hope that I illuminate some of what the game was for people to an extent, but I don't really enjoy being predictive. I don't like that aspect of the job. I think that sometimes we're asked to be predictive too often.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Being descriptive is the most fun aspect of this job. That's why I hated, because when I would write something cool about the Raptors and how they're succeeding, nobody cared. It's like, here's how RJ Barrett is like a 90th percentile pick and roll ball handler in the first half of the season. Everyone's like, the team sucks. You're like, okay. They're like, talk about Cooper Flag. It's like way more people want to watch that. They want to dream about the future. But the Pacers are in the now, baby. And we're describing how they did it.
When we talk about like what people like to watch, hopefully people will prove me wrong. Like this video, watch this video, tell it to other people, recommend it to your friends. But this, I think our preview is now my most watched video that the two of us have done together, which is predictive in a sense. But the other most watched video, if you can believe it, is the one we did about the Bizarro Pacers when things were going very wrong. So I oftentimes feel that sometimes the highest traffic pieces are like, what the heck is wrong with this team? Better than like, let's talk about the cool things that this team just did. For whatever reason that may be.
Polarized, the extremes. When things are going really well, people want to relive what went well. I mean, I don't do it for basketball, but as like a Blue Jays fan, when the Blue Jays win, I'm like very excited to listen to them recap the game, and I'll go for a run or something. But when the Blue Jays lose, I'm like not super interested. But Blake's show, his baseball show, where he dives deep into something, if he's like, this guy has not been doing well, I'm going to deep dive and unearth why. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, sign me up, man. So maybe we're Pacers Talk Plus.
I think what I've learned here is that if I listen to Blake talk about baseball, I might like baseball.
Maybe. He's pretty likable. Actually, no. Blake is the worst, man. He's the worst guy.
So it's just so the listener knows, Blake Murphy covers the Raptors and the Blue Jays in Toronto, and he's a mutual friend of both of ours. We don't actually have adverse. At least I don't.
He's a friend of yours.
He's an enemy of yours.
Yes, exactly.
Star competitors. Well, I feel pretty good about this because I covered the topics that I had in a relatively, I feel, reasonable amount of time here. But if you have other topics that you wanted to talk about from game one, or things that you're thinking about from game two, or general basketball musings, or anything else that you wanted to add, please feel free.
Nope. As per my style, I peppered in everything I wanted to talk about while revealing the lead consistently.
While I was playing the role of bro is just yammering over the tops of clips that aren't moving.
Yeah, that's Caitlin Cooper. A bro is just yammering merchant. Exactly. I like that.
If you'll remember, that's kind of what I was when I first met you. When we first did bouncing around, that's kind of what it was. Like, there was a clip of me and it kind of was just bro is just yammering.
That was analysis, especially on Twitter, has really changed since we first. A lot of the things that you and I would talk about and that people responded to as if they were groundbreaking are now like very accessible to people and talked about by basically anybody with a Twitter account. A lot of stuff that used to be cutting edge has completely normalized. So the conversations have gotten really good. The only thing I hate is that people use catch-alls and are like, there's literally no case to be made. This guy has a better catch-all. That's the one thing I hate. But people talk about basketball in a more informed manner, I think now. Play types, what wins things. Either that or people are just catching on to jargon and using it to try and posture. I don't know. But
so basically what you're telling me is there's nothing special about what we're doing anymore.
Well, no, we adapt as well. I'm just saying, like,
Don't listen to Samson. Please subscribe to the website. I think I provide unique content.
I'm saying that we've adapted as well, but just that I think the dialogue of basketball is more concerned with the how now than it used to be on the level of just somebody who's just visiting the sport every now and again. I think there's more people who visit it more often and think about things, which I think makes us more valuable.
I think that's probably fair. And what I'll tell people is thank you for all of the interest that you showed from all of the various fan bases on the preview podcast. I'm glad that you like to listen to the two of us yammer about whatever clips I've pulled up on the screen that are hopefully playing correctly at the time when we're talking
Another accurate
about them.
prediction from me. I was like, you know what? Fans of other teams are going to flock to this podcast. And what do you know? There it is.
Or were you a self-fulfilling prophecy? By me clipping that clip, they wanted to flock to the podcast.
Perhaps.
I mean, there was Pistons and Knicks fans in there too. Like, it wasn't even just fans from this series.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. We're getting very close to
Or what if the Pacers are just this popular now? Like, maybe they're the fun cutting edge team.
Yeah.
Could be.
I was going to say the self-fulfilling prophecy. We're getting very close to hitting my Dune reference quota. We've just done it. So
it's gone clear over my head because I don't even know what it was.
A self-fulfilling prophecy is basically everything that Dune is about.
Oh, so I hit the quota unknowingly.
Yes.
That's great. And for people who don't know, Dune is Samson's favorite book. He recommended another book to me. I read his book. I recommended a book to him, and it's been on his shelf for probably 4 years now.
That's really funny. Oh, Lord. Forgive me.
Friends and book club members, but Samson doesn't do his homework. He doesn't do his side of the deal.
Oh, that's really funny.
I'm interested to know, is it literally sitting there? Still?
No comment. No comment.
Or did you take it to a book swap and be like, get this Caitlin book out of here?
It will be read. I'm simply too busy. I've signed on to cover a second team recently.
That doesn't hold up at all because you're literally you've taken pictures of yourself holding other books. You've told me about other books.
They were important. They were the most important pressing books of the age. I'll get to it. You just wait. It'll be year 6 and I'll hit you with a reference from it and you'll be like,
and the reason I picked it won't even make sense anymore.
No, it makes sense.
So much time has
passed. It makes sense.
I think what's more likely to happen is that how many Dune books are there? 6? How many are there?
Written by Frank, and then his son. There's like 21 total, but I haven't read any written by the son, and most Dune fans consider them separate things.
So there's 6 of the original series.
Yes.
I bet I'll have all 6 of those read, and you still won't have read the other book.
I doubt it. How many have you read so far? How many Dune books?
None. 0.
Exactly. So we're at the same starting point. Only you have to complete 6. I just have to complete 1.
When I put my mind to reading books, it's one of my worst habits because I binge read books. Like if I get a book, it goes back to college. Like when I would have off time to read what I want to read, I would read it in like 3 days, and then the last 20 pages I ration because I don't want to say goodbye to it. So like the first like 450 I get done in like 3 days, and then the last 50 it's like a week because I don't want to let it go.
There's something there psychologically. I'm telling you right now.
I think there probably is, but it is my pattern. But anyways, I'm sure everybody's been, thrilled to hear about this book conversation. It's what people come to basketball podcasts for, I'm very certain. But anyways, if you enjoyed the actual basketball discussion, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the website. Samson wrote a gamer that went over quite well with all of the people that have subscribed to the website. I think he's very talented at doing those. I think he's very talented at everything he does. Hence why I introduced him as my favorite basketball talker / writer. So I'm glad that he is taking time to cover a second team, even if it means that he doesn't read my book right now.
Yeah, perhaps not as talented a reader as you want, but talented at other things. Everything you said back to you, but actually like it's honest and real. For anyone listening, if this is your first experience with Caitlin, she's the best analyst in the world. I've been saying it for like years. I don't even know how long I've been saying it. A long time, but it's true, and has proven itself ever more true the longer it's gone on. Thanks for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed it.
I should let you do the sign-offs because you have very professional sign-offs that are better than mine. Say the phrase. Say the phrase.
Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.
Thank you.